All right, you're good to go.
Okay, thanks, Melissa.
You're welcome.
So this is Dave Snyder, Chair of the NVTC Program Advisory Committee. Good evening and welcome to our September 17 PAC meeting. I'd like to take note that we're starting this meeting at 5:01 p.m. and I promise we will not go to 1:30 a.m. As some of us have in recent local board meetings. Given the ongoing COVID-19 public health emergency, we're conducting this meeting electronically. We're able to do so because Governor Northam signed into law on April 22nd a legislative amendment to the budget bill to allow public bodies such as this to meet electronically without a physical quorum present to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of that body. NVTC staff follow the procedures and guidelines of the legislative amendment to give notice to the committee, commission, staff, and the public. Commission staff have called in using an audio teleconferencing platform while the meeting is simultaneously being broadcast to the public on YouTube. The only visual component of this meeting is the presentation slides, which are being shown to those on WebEx and on the YouTube stream. In order to help the meeting run as smoothly as possible under this format, I'd like to lay out some procedures for everyone to follow. I would ask that committee members hold their questions and or comments until the end of the presentation. Please mute your phone or device when you are not speaking to help cut down on background noise. Please note that you should mute and unmute through WebEx. For everyone who connected by phone, please make sure to mute your computer speakers to reduce audio feedback. I'll now ask Alan Fye, NVTC's Director of Programs and Policies, to call to identify commissioners and NVTC staff present on the call. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you hear your name, please respond here. Chair Snyder?
Here.
Ms. Bannon Parker?
Here.
Ms. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Meyer? Mr. Faust?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
As a reminder, our bylaws will state that all of the committee meetings are open for any commissioner to attend. We also have General Assembly Member Delegate Reed.
Thank you.
We have a quorum. I'll now identify the staff, including their titles for the benefit of the listening public. We have Executive Director Kate Mattice, myself, Director of Programs and Policy, Alan Fye, Commuter Choice Program Manager Ben Owen, Commuter Choice Communications and Outreach Manager Jay Watkins, and Program Analyst Dina Gurma. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Alan. According to the legislation signed by Governor Northam in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, a public body or governing board convening a meeting during the declared emergency shall provide the public an opportunity to comment. In advance of this meeting, NVTC solicited written comments. Staff captured public comments via Google Forms on NVTC's website. Comments received by 3:00 p.m. today were provided to committee members ahead of the meeting. Alan, did we receive any comments?
I know, Mr. Chair, we did not.
Hey, thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge the rest of the NVTC staff who are working behind the scenes to make this meeting a success. Now, I'd like to turn to the most important item on our agenda, endorsement of the FY 2021 initial round of projects. The Commission received a preview of this approach at the September meeting, but it's up to us as a committee to endorse a program of projects for action in October. However, before I turn it over to Ben, I want to provide a little context for today's discussion for the benefit of the public watching on YouTube. The COVID-19 public health emergency that began in March caused a steep and enduring, at least so far, decline in the I-66 inside the Beltway toll revenues that fund the Commuter Choice program. In the spring of 2020, monthly toll revenues dropped to approximately 10% of VDOT budgeted levels. Currently, I-66 inside the Beltway toll revenues are at approximately 25% of historic monthly budgeted levels. COVID-19 has forced both the Commission and staff to quickly adapt to our new normal, hopefully not a long new normal, but who knows, and continue to strategically invest toll revenue along the I-66 corridor. In order to effectively invest our toll dollars on the I-66 corridor, we've had to revisit how we award funds. Pre-COVID, we had shifted to a 2-year program and we had much higher confidence in the amount of revenue we would be receiving, per the updates to the I-66 Memorandum of Agreement with the Commonwealth. To this day, we're still seeing the impacts of the pandemic on I-66 toll revenue. So it seemed prudent for us to look at this program in 2 phases. the first being for FY 2021, and then have the commission take the remaining projects for FY 2022. Our discussion today will focus on the initial round of projects for FY 2021. NVTC staff will be tracking toll revenue collections closely so we can award additional projects for FY 2022 directly derived from the applications that have already been received and scored. And that's a critical point to make. We're doing fewer projects this year, but we already have a list of the projects and the criteria and the order of those projects for the next fiscal year, where hopefully we'll have more revenues than we are assuming that we do today. Ben Owen, our Commuter Choice Program Manager, is going to dig a little bit deeper into the fiscal impact of COVID-19, walk us through staff's proposed approach to programming the funds we anticipate for FY 2021 and next steps for FY 2022 funding. Ben?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My presentation this evening will actually look fairly familiar in terms of what we've recently covered in our one-on-one briefings as well as at the September commission meeting, but we will go into a bit more detail on things. So with the context that Mr. Chair provided, a bit of a recap of the round 4 revenue picture that we're looking at. When the I-66 round 4 call for projects closed in January prior to the COVID-19 public health emergency, we anticipated $25 million available for projects over the 2 fiscal year period per the revised memorandum of agreement for the I-66 corridor that the Commission and the Commonwealth Transportation Board approved in January. COVID-19 caused a steep drop in VDOT's I-66 inside the Beltway toll revenue collections, as mentioned, particularly in April and May of this year, when their monthly collections were as low as 10% of their budgeted figures for those months. It's been gradually ticking back up, just at about 25% at this point of previously budgeted figures, and over the course of fiscal year 21, VDOT expects to achieve 40% of the amount that they had previously budgeted for the year. So the revenue that we have available now, roughly $4 million for new projects, includes about $2.2 million in carryover balances, interest accrual, and closeouts from projects that have been completed under budget. And then we're anticipating $1.8 million in new toll revenue for fiscal year 2021. So VDOT has given us an estimate that they expect to provide us with $3.6 million in new revenues over the course of the year, again, based on taking in 40% of their budgeted revenue prior to COVID. To be on the very cautious side, since there's still a lot of uncertainty around it, we've cut that in half just in case revenue rebounds more slowly. And I'll talk more about the fiscal year 22 part here than I have in my other presentations to you all recently. As I mentioned, we expect to have a fuller revenue picture for the overall 2-year period in the spring, when we expect to obtain revenue projections from VDOT for fiscal year 22, as well as final payment figures for FY 21. We anticipate that the FY 22 toll revenue projections will exceed the very conservative FY 21 projections under which we're currently operating as commuters begin returning to their work sites. It is possible, too, that FY 21 revenues will end up coming in higher than the very conservative amount that we've projected for the year. We also anticipate, per our MOA, a $5 million payment via the Commonwealth from the outside the Beltway Express Lanes concessionaire around the beginning of fiscal year 2022. And besides that, it's very likely there will be additional projects completed under budget and that close out with returning funds back to us. We just learned of a forthcoming roughly $150,000 de-obligation that wasn't part of our $2.2 million carryover figure, and there likely will be others in the next several months as well. In short, we believe we will have more money to work with, but we want to be very careful, just given the uncertainty, not to overextend now, and feel it would be speculative at best to try to identify a revenue amount for the full 2-year period right now. So in terms of the proposed programming approach, this is very similar to what you saw before in the briefings, but with slightly different wording to align with what's going to be in the commission materials for October. So Overall, the proposal is to split the programming approach into two actions, one now and one next spring. So for now, what we as staff are recommending is awarding the $4 million available for low-risk, relatively low-cost projects. These would include renewals of transit services we've previously supported through the program to provide continuity for commuters as they begin to return to work sites. It would also include small capital projects, specifically efforts that can advance quickly and will provide long-term benefits to commuters, but are not so dependent upon immediate ridership. We'd also be programming our program administration activities for fiscal year 21. So the initial piece is what we're looking for the committee to endorse tonight and the commission to consider on October 1st. And I'll show shortly what that set of projects would look like. As the chair mentioned, we look to be drawing from the same universe of projects when we come back early next year for supplemental programming, once we have a revenue estimate for the remainder of the 2-year period, and assuming that there are indeed additional funds to program, as we anticipate there will be. So at that point, we would be programming new transit services, new commuter incentives, larger capital projects still under consideration. These would either be difficult to accommodate within the available funding now, or they assume demand that may materialize more slowly than expected, just given the current circumstances around travel behavior at this time. The June 2021 timeframe that we're anticipating would dovetail with when the Commonwealth Transportation Board would be adopting the 6-year improvement program, and when we intend to bring forth the 395 Round 2 program, so kind of taking care of two actions at the same time. And we would program our administrative activities for fiscal year 22 at that time. And just to be very clear, we would not be reopening the call for projects or soliciting, in other ways, proposals for additional projects. In a second, I'll apply this programming approach to the applications remaining under consideration for Round 4 funding. But first, a recap of where things stand. We worked with applicants last month to identify which proposals we should keep under consideration for funding. And there are 11 of them with the total funding request of roughly $17.2 million. This is out of the 14 eligible proposals we received back in January. 3 proposals were deferred by their applicants until the next round of funding, when they will likely apply again. The Arlington and OmniRide proposals that show up as deferred, the applicants intend to advance those, just not in this 2-year period. The Loudoun County project that shows as deferred, there's enough funding on their existing project to tide them over through the end of fiscal year 22, since we're giving transit services we previously funded the flexibility to continue until their funds are spent down. And then there are 2 applications for which the applicants indicated that the funding requests could be decreased. The Town of Vienna's Park and Ride, the $5 million figure, represents final construction agreements with Fairfax County should the project be funded. And then the other Loudoun County proposal, with the operations flexibility I mentioned just a moment ago, they need just 1 year of funding rather than 2 to get through the end of fiscal year 22. So in terms of the initial program contents, the 6 specific projects, 3 renewals of existing commuter choice supported transit services. There are 2 OmniRide commuter routes and 1 Loudoun County express route between Purcellville and the Silver Line. And then the 3 small capital projects are a north entrance at the McLean Silver Line station to improve access to and from a large adjacent mixed-use development that's under construction. There is an expansion of Capital Bike Share to the city of Fairfax to create additional options for accessing the Vienna Metro Rail station, and designation of a peak period bus and high occupancy vehicle lane on Lee Highway near Roslyn to reduce delays for buses in particular. As I mentioned, we'd also include our program administration expenses for the year, which is separate from the funding available for projects. We anticipate it's likely going to be in the $250,000 to $300,000 range. We're working to confirm this, and we will have the specific amount for the commission meeting and commission materials. And just to emphasize, all of this can be accommodated within the available funding, with a bit of cushion left over, around $500,000, in case VDOT's payments come in more slowly than anticipated, or to apply to next spring's supplemental programming action. These are the total of 5 new transit services, new commuter incentives, and larger capital proposals that will be under consideration for supplemental programming next spring. There are 2 new bus services on the list. First is reestablishment of limited stop peak period bus service along Route 7 between Tysons and Mark Center. This was a previous Metro bus route that had been discontinued a couple years ago, but this proposed service would follow the route of the proposed Route 7 bus rapid transit project and help to build the market for that service. Also, a new express bus service between the Reston South Park and Ride and the Pentagon, Pentagon City, and Crystal City. There are two proposed commuter incentive projects. One is an OmniRide proposal to defray parking costs for new van pools traveling through the I-66 corridor into Arlington and DC. And then a proposed fare reduction on an existing Fairfax Connector Express service to align the fare with that on Connector's other express routes. And in terms of capital proposals, the proposed Vienna Park and Ride facility that I mentioned as part of the Patrick Henry Library redevelopment. Again, we would not be opening this up for any further proposals. We anticipate we would consider these projects' technical scores as part of the decision-making process for that programming, and we would be including our administration expenses for the year as well. Wrapping up, next steps on the initial program. So shortly we'll stop for questions and discussion on the programming approach, then ask for your endorsement of a program for the full commission to consider next month. We've had public comment open since September 1st on the set of 6 proposed projects that are part of the initial program. That's open through the 21st. Besides promoting the comment period through our social media channels and advertising, we held a virtual town hall meeting on the 11th via YouTube for members of the public to learn more about the proposed projects. That meeting is viewable on YouTube, and we did provide information there on the various means by which people could submit comments to us. So far, we've received a total of a whopping 4 comments, 3 by survey, 1 by email, but people do have a few more days to get those in, and we find that they do tend to come in close to the deadline typically. We will share the full set of comments with the Commission at the October 1st meeting. In terms of what we've received so far, there was 1 expressing support for the McLean second entrance, 1 expressing support for the Lee Highway bus lane, 1 question about why the emphasis on peak period bus service when people are working from home. I would note that tolls are collected on I-66 during peak periods, so that is when transit services we support would need to be in service. On the 1st of October, we will seek the Commission's approval of the initial program and authorization to refer it to the CTB. We will brief them in October, I believe on the 20th or 21st, and then anticipate their action to approve the final program at their meeting subsequent to that, which at this point looks like it's going to be in December. So thereafter, we would begin executing standard project agreements with the funding recipients in the initial program. For the supplemental program, we'll be engaging with our Commonwealth partners early next year to obtain updated revenue estimates in terms of what total payments for fiscal year 21 are looking like, as well as projections for fiscal year 22. To meet the target June 2021 timeframe for final approval of the supplemental program, we would anticipate bringing a proposed program to the committee in the April to May timeframe. Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure, Ben. Thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation. I'll turn it over to Kate if she had any additional comments.
Yeah, thanks again. And I know it's something for the benefit of the committee. One of the things that I believe the chair would like to talk about is that the commitment of the commission is both to funding this initial round and also when it returns to deliberate in the spring, that it, again, I think as Ben said very nicely, the projects that we considered are only those projects that are were applied for, and that the commission would be looking at the technical scores as a serious part of consideration in selecting projects. Obviously, this will also be subject to public comment and to available funds. And so that is, I believe, sort of a 2-part in terms of the recommendation or approval to the commission. One is for the initial round, and the second is how the commission should behave for the second round. Mr. Snyder, did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks.
So
Let me invite any questions or comments from the committee.
Am I the only one? I'm always the first out of the box. First, I just want to really thank the staff. I mean, I think this is a very thoughtful, strategic way to go forward. I really appreciate that. I like the cautious approach. If we find we've got extra money, there's always places that we're going to need to spend it. But I think it's really smart. And then a question that maybe we don't even want to get into here, but maybe for another time. I would be interested at some point, are we getting some feedback information of what best practices are going to be for transit for public health reasons moving forward? You know, sanitizing procedures, spacing procedures, anything like that. I know there is a lot going on. And I'm assuming perhaps that may affect, there may be some spending requests along those lines simply to upgrade what we have now to the current standards that I guess there's probably under development. So I just toss that out as an issue, not for this. I am fine to move forward with this. I thank you for the really good work, but seeing as we're all together, I thought I would ask that question.
Good. Let's, Kate, let's put that kind of a discussion on a future agenda. Okay.
absolutely.
That's a good point.
If I could, just very quickly, the industry in general throughout the United States is very active in this space. And there's a lot of guidance, both coming from the Federal Transit Administration as well as the American Public Transportation Association in this area. All of our transit operators are engaged in that, whether they touch federal money or not.
Great. Thank you, Kate. And I look forward to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. This is a new guy question. So once the program program committee decides on how they're going to spend the money, this is not our money. We have to go to the Commonwealth Transportation Board to get approval to spend it. Do we have it in our possession, or do they then cut a check for the money and send it to us to spend that way?
Yeah, their action will give us authorization to enter into agreements to fund the projects. And then a portion of the money we have in the bank right now in terms of the closeouts and carryover and interest payments, the rest of it would be coming to us from VDOT in quarterly payments over the course of fiscal year 21.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks for the question. And that wasn't the new person question. That's something we all need to know, where the money goes and how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay. The way I tend to run meetings is that silence is viewed as consent. So is there a consensus to move forward with these recommendations as they've been outlined tonight? Any disagreement with that?
No, thumbs up here.
Okay. Not hearing any. Thank you all very much for that. It appears that we do have a consensus. Just a quick reminder that the public comment period for this initial round of projects is open until September 21. So there's still several days left for the public to provide their input. The public should go to novatransit.org and click on the link for the public comment period for commuter choice on the I-66 corridor. Once the public comment period closes, staff will share any comments and feedback with the committee and the full commission. Before we close, is there any other business for the committee?
Could I bring up a question for a future agenda as well? Another one, if I might.
Of course.
Very
Of course.
quickly. We're all here together. And that is, as we go through, I thought about it, Mr. Chair, as you're reading through all of the, which I do before every meeting, we all have to saying why we're holding this virtually and we're allowed to do it. The assumption kind of being as soon as the pandemic and the emergency are over, which is looking like it's going to last a while, but then we go back to the same in-person, not able to do virtual meetings. And personally, I'm finding a lot of times these virtual meetings a lot easier to manage when I don't have to drive miles and miles, different places to get together. And I would think everybody in this group particularly, obviously this one's easy for me, I go across the street from my office, but for everybody else, it's a long haul. So I'm wondering if when we get there, maybe even this next legislative session, because it'll probably involve a certain amount of discussion and everybody needs to be kind of willing to do this. I would really like to get some legislation that allows us to hold meetings, both virtually and in person, to allow people who are at a distance, who are traveling, who maybe are not well, who for whatever reason can't or find it difficult to get to the meeting, but to still be able to participate. So that would be future, but I'm sort of thinking ahead because I'm finding there's some things I don't like about this, but there are a lot of things I'm finding really much better and allow me to be a lot more efficient. Thank you. Thanks for letting me kind of horn in here. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, we actually, thankfully, within our bylaws, even outside of a public health emergency, now make it possible for 2 of the meetings of any of our committees. You have a get out of office free card for 2 of the meetings.
Good.
We
And
can
that's what we
definitely
have.
consider that as a part of our legislative agenda and talk to our colleagues about that.
Yeah, excellent. I just think it ought to be limiting it to 2. I mean, people have things in their life. Anyway, I would love to give us the flexibility to do whatever works best because I don't see any purpose served by, obviously I'm missing something, but by requiring people to always be present. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So Libby, are you suggesting sort of a hybrid approach where you have those who can attend in person be there and then the others electronically? And so folks who wanted to be there and in person to make comments in person could do so, but you've actually expanded the ability for public input as well by providing a virtual option for input in advance of the meeting and as otherwise appropriate. Are you suggesting a hybrid approach?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And there may be some meetings, some issues for some reason that the commission as a whole thinks we really all need to be in the room and that we want to require it. But I just think that should be up to the commission itself and really based on what works best for ourselves, our staff, and our public, not on some arcane rule that seems to be based on the 18th century. Just saying. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Mayor Meyer, I see that you joined us. Any questions or comments?
Well, on that point, I think we all probably understand that the existing law does allow, as Kate said, 2 meetings a year. However, individual members can invoke a health reason. It doesn't count against your 2. And if someone believes that their participation, even in a post-pandemic environment, most of the public health officials are saying that the next phase of this, and when we come out of the pandemic, is going to be more nuanced, that the vaccine may not be universal for everyone, and that some people categorically or for other reasons may not be experiencing the same benefits from a vaccine, so that it's possible that we may be in a kind of a blended health situation for several years. And so those members of these public bodies that might want to invoke a health reason for themselves personally, that wouldn't count against their 2. Now, we certainly don't want people to abuse it or be disingenuous, but I think there's more flexibility than we may realize. Although I do support Libby's comment about pursuing some legislation that might even be a little bit more definitive on that in that regard, because I do believe that this technology in some ways actually increases public participation and public access to the discussions that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be, Mr. Mann, I don't know if it's in the legislation. I just think we ought to have like no excuse early voting, no excuse virtual participation. Maybe you're not sick, but maybe you've got a 2-year-old that needs you home. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that happen with people's lives. And I really I love it when people are given the flexibility to do what works best for them. And again, with the commission being able to, for some reason decide that we need to be present or whatever. But no, I hear you. There's more flexibility than we thought, but I just don't think people should have to worry about, have I had my 2? Does it fit the quality? And so thank you. I'll appreciate whatever support I can get though.
And
No, I concur with your comment.
So Libby, this is David Reed.
Committee is Mr. Meyer, so I do believe that we can take this as an action in the legislative committee.
Yep.
So Libby, this is David Reed, and I would concur with you. It's one of those things where I think that there is great value in being able to get together, but again, by the same token, sometimes because a lot of us have either civilian jobs or other things that are going on, that we want to be able to participate. And I think one of kind of the benefits that will come out of the COVID-19 is that we're now proving that you can do this remotely and that you can actually have participation from citizens as well. So this is a good kind of proving ground for when we're in a post-COVID-19 environment that we could do this as we continue just with normal meetings as well.
Yeah, thank you. Great. I mean, we're finding a big uptick in a lot of our commissions and some of our community organizations. Some of the old one have been around for a long time and resisting change, and suddenly they're shocked. Oh my, we have more people on this meeting than we've ever had. Well, yeah, because it's easier. So I appreciate the support, Mr. Reed. Thank you.
Thanks. Those are all great comments, and we'll pass those on for further discussion. Is there anything else that people would like to discuss before we adjourn? Okay, thanks very much for the consensus on our action item, and I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn. Does someone want to make the motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Kate, did you get those? The mover and the seconder? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you all very much. You now have
Thanks.
an hour back in your life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. It's nice to see everybody.